one thing I kept realizing is that the questions that I was getting from the doctors a lot of them were the same. And I thought, this is just so interesting because what I realized is they were just kind of like lone islands out there. And I had this idea of why don't I just put them together? And that's what I did.
Bienvenidos a Volver al Futuro Podcast, donde platicamos con las mentes que nos impulsan a crear el nuevo paradigma de salud y bienestar. Conducido por Víctor Sadia.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Today we have Kristen Brokaw.
Kristen Brokaw es fundadora de SLIM, el Instituto de Medicina Integrativa de St. Louis, una agrupación sin fines de lucro que, desde hace 13 años, funge como directorio de médicos funcionales para pacientes. Sobre todo, SLIM es un espacio de reuniones constantes entre médicos integrativos y funcionales que están cuestionando y reinventando la manera convencional de hacer medicina. Kristen también forma parte del equipo de ventas de nutracéuticos Orthomolecular Products.
Kristen, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you so much as well. I am happy to be here.
My first question is kind of obvious, but I love the way you tell it. How did you get into functional medicine?
Well, in 2005, I was driving down the highway, just like any ordinary Monday, and I was going 60 miles an hour. And out of nowhere, somebody drove over into my lane, slammed into me, threw me up onto two wheels. I almost flipped the car. And needless to say, I was in pain for quite a bit of time, right? So I almost totaled my car. And I went to the ER, and I remember the medical doctor saying, yeah, you got hit pretty badly. Go see your doctor. I go see my doctor that following day. And he said, oh, you'll be fine in no time. Just go get some physical therapy. And long story short, I was not fine in a short amount of time. And I spent a well over a year just being in constant pain, migraines, et cetera, not knowing. I was only 30 at the time. And I thought, geez, I was a college athlete. I didn't feel bad ever until now. And someone that recommended I go see a functional medicine doctor. And that doctor was the first doctor that actually asked me, what was I eating? And how was I living my life? I remember thinking, like, what does that have to do with anything? I'm in pain, But what I loved about his approach was he really cared about the root cause. And it was just so impactful on me. And it changed my life and it got me better. And I knew I needed to be in that industry. And that is what I sought out. And then that's why I sought out orthomolecular. And I've been with them almost 15 years.
So the accident basically also got you the opportunity to know yourself a bit deeper in terms of your lifestyle and the other things. Usually when you get to a functional medicine doctor, you have chronic illness. But in your case, it was probably just an acute episode that it wasn't going away in terms of pain.
Exactly.
Wasn't it difficult for you to make the switch in your mind that probably you wanted a solution that came quickly or in forms of a drug or something, and not really going in your lifestyle, in your life?
I didn't actually want it in a form of a drug. It was interesting because he wanted to give me antidepressants. And I said, I'm only depressed because I'm in pain. I'm not a depressed person. And I just said, I wanted to know how I could go back. I didn't ever have to think about what I was thinking about, right? And it was interesting because that doctor, first thing he asked me was, do you consume dairy? And I was like, yeah. And he said, how much? And I was like, I don't know, like a half a gallon of milk a day. Oh my God, I cringe just thinking about it. But he told me that it was creating a lot of my allergies, and which I obviously wasn't even there to see him for allergies, right? But I listened and I said, okay, let's see what this guy's talking about. And within like 3 days, I go, oh my gosh, I'm like breathing normally. So that's why he kind of hooked me in because I thought, okay, he knows something that I don't know. And then he was giving me these supplements and I'm like, all right, well, I'm feeling better, right? And then I was hooked.
And then how did you get to orthomolecular?
He recommended them. He said, he actually used several of our products on me. And he said, in fact, they're hiring. And he put in a call to the president and here I am.
So you began visiting physicians trying to sell these nutraceuticals. How the first years, how did they go?
Well, it was eye-opening. I obviously had a lot to learn, but one thing I kept realizing is that the questions that I was getting from the doctors were, a lot of them were the same, right? And I thought, this is just so interesting, because what I realized is they were just kind of like lone islands out there. And I had this idea of, why don't I just put them together? And that's what I did. Like, I didn't know what I was doing per se. I've never organized anything in my life. And after about a year of doing that job and hearing the same things and hearing the same concerns, I just booked a room. I invited 28 physicians of all different specialties. I knew I wanted it to be really well-rounded, and 25 came to that very first dinner that I had. And we talked. I said, what can we do as a group? Like, I kind of now consider myself a border collie. Like, if I was a dog, what dog would I be? I'd be a border collie. And because I really realize I'm a herder. Like, I like to keep the herd together. That was innate in me. So yeah, the doctors were just so excited to be around like-minded people. They knew of each other, but they didn't know each other. And that's how I started SLIM, which is the St. Louis Institute of Integrative Medicine.
Great. So before we go into that, I've been thinking a lot about the sales reps for traditional pharmaceutical companies, where they engage their clients, in this case, physicians, trying to sell the products with, the same papers that are produced by their own marketing or research sections of the company. And the relationships are a bit cold, a bit boring, a bit transactional. How do you visualize that sales reps should evolve to really form partnerships with those clients who are visiting on a weekly, monthly basis?
Well, we are, as nutraceutical sales reps, we are different than a pharmaceutical sales rep, in that we have 190 products, versus one drug, let's say, right? Or two or whatever. But the doctors that we're calling on are also looking for answers, right? So they're already outside of the box. And I think those are the two differences, right? Is that we are representing a company, not just one thing. And it also, our company, Orthomolecular, we are trained. It's in our DNA to really become consultants and partners with our physicians, to not we take a consultative sales approach versus transactional, like you'd mentioned earlier. So I am dear friends with many of my doctor. I mean, friends. I was just at one of their houses this weekend. There'll be several over at my house this weekend. So it's really different. And not all nutraceutical sales reps probably do this, but I know our company is different. We are the best one. But as a sales rep, it's easy in this industry to see how you can really help these doctors, because they don't have all the answers. It's not just like, this is the protocol, right? It's functional medicine. It's an art.
Do you see also the sales rep practicing this art going also beyond what their own products might mean in their practice, and the supplements in this case, and also talk about other areas on how to improve the practice of each of these physicians, like in terms of marketing or business consultation, or other inquiries, questions, or needs that they have?
I mean, that's absolutely the kind of approach that I take, that I'm trained to take, that I know Orthomolecular takes. I don't know about other companies, but that's what's in I guess I have those tools that I can also offer. There's something called the Lifestyle Matrix Resource Center, and they help doctors with tools that they can use that are patient forward, or ways that they can do, say, group visits, which is something that would strategically help their practice, right? So I don't know about other sales reps, but if they're listening, that's the way they should be doing things. It's because it's just good business, but it is the right thing for the provider.
And everyone wins at the end of the day. And that's what you want in these generative relationships. So Slim started as meetups. It's been how many years?
13 and a half.
13 and a half years putting an ecosystem or a trust environment where new people are coming in every day, sharing their own stories. What are good anecdotes that you have of those meetups, and what cool things have happened in the past 13 years?
Doctors have gone into business with each other. Gosh, I can't even tell you how many. I probably am at 10 to 12 of those. The referrals, co-treating a patient as a team, because they know that it's like, oh, I met that cardiologist at the dinner. And I also know that we need a gastroenterologist. So if I'm a doctor, I know I have those two people. And so it's the referral network that everybody loves. I can put a face to a name, and actually I've had a conversation with that and I like that person. So when I'm referring, they also love the ideas that they get. So here comes a doctor, maybe going to a seminar, et cetera, and they say, oh, I'm also using this lab, or I'm looking at things this way. It's like they get their current context kind of expanded, right, on how they treat something. They really love the ability to get new ideas on how to treat patients. So, and I would say, I just talked to a doctor today, friendships, not only people going into business with each other, but I know people are now like friends, look forward to seeing each other at these dinners. I just had a doctor tell me last weekend, she said, I don't go because of the content. I don't even look at the title of what we're going to be talking about. I go because I know I go, right? And that makes me feel so good. It's like, yes, you just go because it's going to be great. You're going to have a good time. You're going to like the networking. You're going to like the learning. The food's going to be delicious and nutritious and healthy and gluten-free and dairy-free.
What also, I guess, it's happening is that, it's forming a small group of people who are, in a sense, envisioning what the future of medicine might look like. In many ways, we are a counter movement to traditional healthcare in the US or in the world, like very acute disease oriented, very pharmacological and all that. And by forming this community, there's also this sense of we can do it together, but we cannot do it separately. And we need each other to change the paradigm. Do you see that a lot?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't know, it's just my doctors play really, really well in the sandbox together. They truly believe that they need each other, right? That, and that this idea of, so we need a celebrity doc per se to come in and tell us the latest protocol or to educate us. No, the celebrity doctors are practicing medicine just like the rest of them, right? And the smarts that are I think they really realize like the smarts and the resources that we have in that room, just in our little small ecosystem here in the Midwest, is just as good as, right, anywhere.
You were telling me about referrals, that they happen a lot. Have you seen also multidisciplinary work with the same patient? Like, please go see my friend who's a specialist in whatever. But then that friend will call you back and try to talk about the same patient because they've seen it from different angles, in a sense. Do you see also collaboration in that sense?
Yes, I've had many doctors tell me that's also the nice part about going to the dinner. It's like, oh yeah, I know you. And so then when that doctor calls to say, hey, I want to talk about a patient, well, it's like, okay, you can now put a face to a name and someone that you like, that you've met, that is safe, right, to talk about the way that you treat things. I've had many doctors tell me that that's one of the biggest benefits, is that they can communicate. And they've even said, hey guys, let's share cell phones. We have a private Facebook group that they can then ask a question. They'll throw out there like, hey, what do you guys recommend for treating X, Y, or Z, right? So those are a couple of options. But a lot of people contact me because I'm kind of the conduit for information. And so I will refer them, give them the email address or cell phone number of whomever they need to get a hold of.
Tell me about how did you meet James Maskell, and how similar are your jobs in a sense?
Well, I think James and I started out the exact same way. He was a sales rep. We both did it. It's kind of funny. Like we were both doing it, but just didn't even know who each other were. So he always says I was the forum before there was the actual functional forum, but he saw a need just like I did. I mean, it's just ironic, but not really. And someone had mentioned, I think it was the president of my company, had mentioned to me about 7 or 8 years ago. He said, there's this guy, James Maskell. He's kind of doing what you're doing. We should introduce you or whatever. And I remember I ran into him at an IFM AIC, their annual international conference. It was the one in San Diego back in 2014, maybe 15. And I went up to him and he goes, I know who you are. And I go, I know who you are. And it was nice. And then I guess he and I kind of kept in touch over the years and little by little. And when he did his New Vision tour, I said, hey, you should come to St. Louis. And he didn't organize our city. I organized our city, and we did it in about 2 weeks. And we had 100 people there. And he was like, oh gosh, okay, you really have a community here. I said, yeah. So I don't know. He likes what I've done with the meetups, and he asks me to help other people that want to do meetups. And that's sort of the role I've taken on with Evolution of Medicine, is that I'm kind of the support person for someone who's wanting to do a meetup.
I've also heard you interviewing a few people on the Evolution of Medicine podcast. How has been that for you?
Oh, that's fun. I feel like I'm channeling my inner Barbara Walters. It's so fun to ask the questions I love the business side and like the mindset way that providers don't get enough of. They get the clinical, but it's like, give them what they want and then give them what they need. So there's all the clinical stuff on the podcast, but then what they need is like the mindset business side of things. So that's why they've snuck those in there, right? And I've had many doctors tell me they really appreciate those things. Or at some slim dinners, I've even had a clinical, a clinical topic. And then towards the latter half, we'll have someone come on who's going to talk about business or marketing. And if I would have led with that, a lot of times they would have been like, I don't know. And then they're like, okay, I needed that. That's great. I've got some great ideas. Thank you.
Yeah, it's taking the idea of empowering the doctors, but in many arenas, not only on the clinical functional approaches of medicine. You've also talked about the importance of the stories, the physician's stories about their life and their health transformation and their health mindset. Um, and when we spoke about obviously organizing a meetup in Mexico, you told me that it was important to make everyone see and feel that their story has a lot of value, and that they should share their story and their experience, because it's really what brings people together, but also what inspires and, in a sense, teaches the rest of the group on how to do certain things.
Yeah, I have been working with one of my mentors for about 6 years. His name's Bo Eason. And he taught me that story is it's like all you've got, right? Your story. And my story that I shared with you about how I found integrative medicine, well, that, if I would have had a different story, or if I would have went a different direction, I probably wouldn't be on this podcast right now, right? So it allows people to say yes to you or no to you. And doctors, when I ask them about their story and I hear it, which every single one of them has it, and especially their transition from typically allopathic to when they made the jump right over to the other side, and why, usually it's a personal thing or someone in their family. And that's important, right? But they're taught that it's not about them. It's not about you, don't share, right? And that's doing the patient such a disservice. So I started a mastermind about almost 4 years ago, and I brought doctors together, and our tenets are your story, understanding, like getting them to remind themselves of actually what is your story and your why, right? As Simon Sinek would say, your why. And then I also talk about in the mastermind, like eliminating what is it that you need to stop doing, because that everybody's got the shiny penny syndrome. It's easy to have that. But really the third thing then is like going towards mastery and kind of staying in your lane and doing it well, your thing, right? And to be a jack of all trades, master of none is not a master, right? And if that's not your jam, that's fine. Just know that you're not going to reach mastery. So story is where you start, because it's how people, I think compliance goes up. If someone, I had someone in my mastermind, her name's Carrie. She said when she told this one, she was listening to this patient, they were telling her their story, and she listened, and they said, do you even know how I feel? And she set her pen down and she looked at him and she told her story in like 3 sentences. And the patient was sitting there with her sister. And then the sister leans back in her chair and says, that's it, I'm making an appointment here, So it's that it can be that powerful, but you got to get it down. You got to get it quick and, but know just the right thing to say. So I think doctors should share who they are more.
Absolutely. What about this mastermind? Is that that's also part of Slim?
I guess you could say it's a division. Maybe it was just one of those things that it's like, all right, Slim is clinical. Let's face it, that's the majority of it. This is none of this is clinical in the mastermind. It's really where we hone in on what does it take to be the best and how do we figure out our story. How do we know what we need to eliminate? How do we like stay in our lane? How do we, run the miles to get towards mastery kind of thing? And it's just this little group that honestly, I needed it. I needed it and I knew they did. And I mentioned it to several people and we've been going strong now for almost 4 years. So I love it. That's my love, is getting into the heads, right? Of like having us all just become vulnerable, right? And work on what does it take to be our personal best. So
it's amazing how there's this parallel between this emerging movement of group visits and group consultations and forming this, group of patients who are better together. The same thing is happening with physicians who are treating those patients, and they must get together. In a sense, there's this very similar dynamic that's happening because in both you're trying to allow some space for vulnerability, for partnership, for accountability, for learning. And, at the end of the day, as James says, community, not medicine, is what creates health. And in that sense, I think that patients and doctors need exactly the same things.
thank you. I mean, it's said perfectly, right? So I tell my doctors that when I try to get them to understand the concept of group visits, of which has been so near and dear to my heart, ever since I watched Dr. Shilpa Saxena do one in her office, gosh, almost 10 years ago. I flew down to Florida and watched her do it in Tampa. And it was so impactful. She had 16 people in a room. I asked them personally, like, why are you here? Oh my gosh, I learned so much. I love this. I need to know I'm not alone, right? I've been preaching that to doctors. Well, they go to conferences. Isn't that learning as a group? Don't they love being able to ask questions to the speaker? It's no different. It is no different. Yet physicians think patients just want all individual. Yeah, and there's a time and a place for it. Don't get me wrong. Our whole lives are not nothing but group. So I'm glad you make that parallel because I make that one all the time to the doctors.
And you know what? At least in Mexico, I'm not sure in the US, but in Mexico, doctors really go through a grueling 6, 8, 10 years of education in a very individualistic setting, very competitive. They're all trying to be the best grades, best awards, whatever. And when they go out and they want to start forming partnerships, it's difficult for them to really trust the others because you've been competing with them all along. And, every single difference in opinion is like labeling the other person as incompetent and, those black and white ways of thinking. And it's not up until the point where you bring them together in the same room that they see that the other person is it's the same and you can trust the other person and she or he is as vulnerable as you are and we're both trying to understand what we're doing. And that's why I think that it's even therapeutic for the physicians and it can even help them with a lot of wounds of their own education in the past to heal together.
I mean, that was said perfectly. Yeah, I don't know that I would add anything, but I appreciate you also as a crusader for that mission because we do need each other. And the doctor is learning just like the doctor sitting next to them and they are trying to figure it out and they do need each other. And when they talk about it, it's like, oh, okay, I can see that this is a different way to look at it. The patients are no different. When you get patients in a group, maybe a doctor's been telling the Sally who's in her group that day, the gut group, maybe it's a group where they're just talking to patients with gut issues and the doctor's talking about gluten-free. Well, Sally's been hearing the doctor say that forever. And then Betty is in the group and says, oh, doctor, I finally went gluten-free and I'm going to tell you how I feel and blah, blah, blah. Well, now Sally's listening, right? Because Sally hears that Betty did it. And Betty doesn't look like she's a movie star. Betty just looks like her, right? So she sees that it's possible. And that's what we need more of.
What about this last year? How have your meetups evolved in the pandemic? Is Zoom a good alternative? What are the pros and cons of having to meet virtually?
Well, we did meet virtually 2 or 3 times. And it was successful. We already had an established meetup group, right? However, I think during the pandemic, many people were wanting community. They were tired of isolation. And then we all kind of maybe are a little zoomed out. I'm not so sure. I still enjoy Zoom. I'm not on them all the time. I'm lucky that I get to get out and see everybody like I used to. But we have met during this pandemic. We did, last year it was like we had our last dinner in March, right before the shutdown, like 2 weeks before the shutdown. And then we did virtual over the summer, which we wouldn't have met over the summer anyway. But we did a few virtual things, and just so that I could keep everybody together. And they showed up, and it was great. It was great. We even did something that very first week. I put something out on a Wednesday, and we had a doctor panel of 11 doctors on Friday. Like, that's how it was in the beginning. It was easy to get people together. And then we had another meeting in late September, and then we had one in November. So where we actually got together September and November. So I would say the Midwest is maybe different than other places, but we were still in lockdown. It was just, we were eating a meal, some restaurants you were able to eat in. We found one that was possible. We all take our supplements and weren't doing anything crazy, and everybody was okay. So we're blessed.
Great. Tell me a little bit about your week. How do you organize your week, your times, your lifestyle?
Well, as a sales rep, I obviously am working Monday through Friday, typically 8 to 5, which is standard for meetings and things like that. But I also do dinners with doctors. But I've been doing this a while, and I've been in sales for my entire life. So I've been selling for, 23 years or so. I'm blessed that I have assistants that also help me. So I'm huge into delegation. That's the second tenet of the mastermind is elimination. What is it that you need to stop doing? So here I am giving everyone permission, do what you do best and have others help you to support in the things that they can do better than you. And if that means email, then that means email. Or if that means grocery shopping, that means that, right? So I have a lot of support. I definitely have a lot of support, and I've worked on that, but it has allowed me then to do more of what only I can do, which is study to get smarter, right? So that I can know the products better, or so I can read articles and not do expense reports or whatever. That's typically what, but I am an avid blue blocker wearer. I've got my Aura ring. I am big into recovery and meditation. And I would say that's just happened in the last, 4 years or so, where my health is important, because burning the candle at both ends, which we've all done, and I did for a long, long time, I started to realize, okay, this isn't working anymore, especially after I was exposed to mold in my eyes, it affected my eyes. I thought something's got to change. So
yeah, how was that experience with mold?
yeah, I was definitely burning the candle at both ends when I ripped the floor up in my basement, which had mold underneath it. And I did it with 2 other people, and they were fine, and I wasn't. So I inhaled it. I'm sure it got in my eyes. I'm sure it's a crazy neurotoxin. And so the vessels in my eyes severely started to hemorrhage. And I did that for months and months. And I didn't do anything about it. I don't even know why I didn't do anything about it. But finally, when it got so bad that it was really, really, really impacting just how I could see things, I went to a doctor. And then that's when he said, you've got a rare autoimmune condition called birdshot chorioretinopathy. And it took me going back through some pictures, plus listening to a Dr. Jill Carnahan podcast, to put 2 and 2 together of, oh my gosh, when I ripped the floor up in my basement and I exposed myself to mold, that's what caused the eyes. See, I didn't know that at first, nor did the doctor. And he said, oh, that couldn't be possible. And then, but of course, I know, of course it's possible. And then I look at how stressed out I was all the time and working all the time. And so now I care more about restoration, right? Recovery, work hard and then recover. That's what my life looks like.
What are your plans for, let's say, 5 years?
I think I'm going to be supporting, the group movement. I know I will. And I'm definitely going to be focusing on the mastermind and keeping the doctors and growing that, because it's too important. Like the doctors that have been in our group and what they've done, expanded their practice. One bought a building and doubled their practice. 2 of them said, that's it. I realized I don't want this practice anymore. I want to do something totally different. Not totally, they're still in medicine, but like, I don't want to be confined to this building. I mean, just transformational changes from just being given permission. And that's what I'm interested in.
Amazing. Kristen, thank you so much for making time for this interview. I really look forward to potential collaborations and to follow your steps in creating community and thus creating health in Mexico, Latin America, and wherever the world takes me. So thank you so much for your guidance, and wanted to ask if you have anything else to add or comment.
Well, if you said this is being listened to by providers and many other types, I would say figure out what it is, about sharing your story. Like, figure out your story. And that looks like, why did you come into this? And just try to get it down into that like hero's journey. Like, what were you doing? What happened to you? And then what did you learn? That's how you kind of just share it in a nutshell. And I would share that with your patients. And then I would say, find a community. Find a community. I mean, I know you're clearly wanting to build one and you have built one, but if not, build it yourself, right? Even if it's just 5 people in a living room, get together with other people that are just like you, because I promise you, if you ask them, they would say, yeah, I feel the same way, isolated. Let's do something. It just takes the person asking. Like, I asked 28 people to come to that very first dinner in 2008 and 25 showed up. That's powerful.
It's funny that you mentioned the hero's journey. We just chose the narrative, the driving narrative for our upcoming National Congress in Lifestyle Medicine. And it's precisely that, the hero's journey of patients and physicians really coming to terms with new developments and new threats and new challenges that we must overcome together.
Think about it. What story have you ever been told that's not in the hero's journey? I mean, it's a boring story if it isn't, right? You got to have conflict. Otherwise, that's why Darth Vader's there.
That's exactly right. Kristen, thank you so much for this conversation. I wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Nos encantaría recibir tu retroalimentación de estos podcasts para continuar generando contenidos que te sean útiles e interesantes. Si puedes, déjanos un comentario en la página web victorsaadia.com.